Beyond. Stop it. You good?
We did. We
Beyond.
totally stopped
All right.
it.
Cool.
Look, I haven't done this in a while. Beyond.
Shut up.
Sorry, I'm back.
Thank you.
Hi.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, to Podcast Beyond. This is episode 437. My, that's so many episodes. I'm Max Scoville. Joining me, Alana Pierce.
Hey, what's up?
Brian Altano.
What's up?
And Marty Sleva?
Yeah, you got it right.
Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Damn, Gina.
We did. Oh, dang.
Yeah.
Remember Gina?
What's going on?
Not too much, man. I had a real good week. I don't know.
Cool.
I don't know what day of the week it is.
All right. So we're off to a good start. A lot of hot new PlayStation news to talk about. There's no shortage of news. New what?
Nudes?
No.
Yeah, PlayStation nudes.
PlayStation nudes?
Yeah, they show what it looked like when the controller isn't wearing any clothes.
Clothing?
It looks normal because they don't make clothes for that. There's
probably
those
do.
skins and decals, but that's about it.
Sackboy unzipped.
Skin is just clothes of the
I
flesh.
don't like that at all.
So we're in that weird part of the year that's kind of like coming up on E3, where we're starting to get little glimmers of leaks of things that might be getting
secrets.
announced. The
Yeah.
secrets, the sneaky leaks.
Don't call them that.
The E3 crits.
Don't call them that either.
I can't call them that?
All this is terrible.
Okay, fine. Okay, the latest we've heard is that the next Call of Duty is going to be in the very far future. This comes from a reputable, proven industry insider on NeoGAF named Shinobi602, who says that the new game's future setting makes Black Ops 3 feel like the Stone Age, and asked if he meant the game would be in the style of Battlefield 2142. He said, very far future. Space combat. Full-on sci-fi. This again is...
Battlestar
Probably, well, I feel like it's going to be it's going to be grittier.
Battlestar, Firefly, like Star Wars. Like, it's sort of interesting to think that, EA has Battlefront now in their sort of disposal as a cool sci-fi shooter, and is this Activision's version of that? And Shinobi, it's silly to be like proven insider on NeoGAF, but Shinobi is someone who's been around for years and who does have contacts in the industry, and I follow him on Twitter because a lot of times he'll tweet out cool little tidbits.
I mean,
A lot
I
of
think
times
they've
they're
been
correct.
heading in that direction anyway, so this wouldn't surprise me at all. But it's also like, maybe it actually is because of Star Wars. Star Wars is becoming popular all over again.
Yeah.
Well, there's
Maybe
Star
they're
Wars,
trying to get
there's
on that.
Destiny, there's Mass Effect, there's a lot of kind of sci-fi stuff that
Titanfall.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Like,
I feel like... Here, you go.
Oh no, this is interesting because this is so this year is, assuming it's Infinity Ward's year for a game, which their last game was Ghost, which was not very good, but that was sort of almost like their team's first game because everyone left after Modern Warfare 3 after the whole Respawn debacle, and so the team that sort of made Modern Warfare what it wasn't really the team that made Ghost.
worth noting that had space combat too, but it was like shooting a gun on a space shuttle. Like,
Yeah.
It wasn't really
Very
All
literal.
I really want is like a Gundam fight in space.
It sounds amazing.
That's all I really want. If
They were
they had
heading towards a
Titanfall
lot of
in
the
space.
sort of like amputee robotic cyborg stuff in the last few games. There's been a lot of big notes on that.
Yeah.
It's weird. We brought up Star Wars. I feel like Star Wars is actually more grounded, or Battlefront specifically, based on the original trilogy, obviously, is more grounded in sort of the older Call of Duty style than it is any sort of futuristic space combat. Because there's not a lot of like wall running. I mean, you get jetpacks and stuff like that, but it's mostly just guns and grenades and, some laser cannons and stuff like that.
Kind of funny to think that the guns in Battlefront, which are actually based on World War II weaponry, are more realistic than Call of Duty guns at this point.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, if you're going to have like weird sonic pulse shotgun rifles or whatever.
I was actually just watching the documentaries that come with the original trilogy that they put out through Amazon, and that just talk about how they made Han Solo's gun and its modified versions of actual real world guns and stuff like that.
It's a broom handle Mauser. Like,
Like stuff like Star Wars and Firefly is like not futuristic in tech.
Yeah.
I was just about to say, it's not really future tech. It's not jetpacks and wall running, and there are jetpacks and wall running. I guess both of those exist.
It's sort of paleo futuristic at this point, especially because the new Star Wars movies are still sort of based on the vision of a weird side future from the 70s.
Well, and it's also a Western and a samurai movie, which is sort of what also Firefly is. Which
and whatever
I
the
think
hell Wizard of
that
Oz
could be
is.
super cool if they take sort of a Western or even a World War II mentality and
it's
put it in space.
It's rare to hear me say this, but we already have Destiny. We already have Battlefront. Like, we've got stuff that is that kind of like not crunchy hard sci-fi. Like, it's very much like kind of like it's whimsical. I would be really down to see this being like, hey, like, what do futurists actually think that space combat would be like? What if there's like space colonies, like Robert Heinlein type stuff, or just
like Mass Effect with
I would like to see Mass Effect with like Mass Effect, but with a harder world to live in.
Yeah.
like that's
Yeah,
what sucks
you're
about
right.
Mass Effect. Is
It's
it's sort
easy.
of they're like just hop in the old those space tunnels and just zap
Like the
around.
challenges in Mass Effect are to do with planned combat and never to do with actual survival
Mm-hmm,
or anyone not recognizing you.
Yeah.
It's just because everyone wants to shoot you, so it's not like a real.
This feels like
Challenge?
it's going to be like way more sort of technologically, mechanically proficient than anything we've ever seen from this franchise before. I'm kind of hoping that it gives them a good excuse to just go hard and strange with the art direction. The one thing about Call of Duty games is that no matter what's happened with them, they are almost immediately always recognizable as
Yeah.
Call of Duty games.
Which is why I haven't played one since 4.
right, because you just feel like you have,
Yes.
right?
I have no desire to, because everything that I've ever seen marketed has been like, well, I feel like I've already experienced that.
Yep.
You missed out
Yep.
on cool zombie stuff.
Yeah.
actually.
I've heard
the zombie
that,
modes are
yes.
really cool.
So
Zombie
actually,
modes do seem
that's I like that a lot. Where that was for the first time ever. You were like Max and I did some Let's Plays on that, and we were like, we're playing a Call of Duty game right now. Like
Jeff
it doesn't feel like
Goldblum's
that.
a weird magician. and
Yeah,
there's like
it looks like
spell
BioShock.
powers. Yeah.
So if they can make this so I can walk by somebody playing this game and I'm like, what is that? And they're like, Call of Duty. And I, instead of me going, oh, is that the new Call of Duty? I mean, then I think it'll be immediately a far bigger success, at least artistically, than any of them have
Think
in
about
years.
the differences between the Wolfenstein games.
Yes.
Like
Totally.
those games all look completely different to one another. They're like not immediately recognizable as Wolfenstein unless you see Nazis, basically.
Yeah, they also take a very long time in between Wolfenstein games.
As much as I'd like to
traditionally.
say it, Call of Duty is, I mean, Activision makes safe games. Like they make, when they have something set up that could be like the next big crazy thing, they're not rich because they take crazy big risks like that.
Yeah.
Like Call of Duty is a very iterative franchise. They've got some kind of probably massive Bible style guide in terms of what works and what doesn't, and it's backed up by probably a lot of market research data, focus group,
mean,
QA testing stuff. And
Yep.
Every single year they sell on the top. Like
Yeah.
they're always
No,
on the top.
completely.
Well, if
Every
you look at
single year.
like the 80s and 90s for video games, we were obsessed with things like ninjas and robots, right? Like cyborgs were in everything. And games didn't look great back then. I mean, you had to make them 2D or
Did you play
barely
Jet Force
3D.
Gemini?
Yeah,
It's a real good game.
It's a good
Real
game
good.
for sure.
Real good game.
That's actually a really good example of something that's like so definitively
It
sci-fi.
was super sci-fi. Even
And-
like some of the levels were ships. Like
Yeah.
it was just so sci-fi.
Where that's what I'm thinking about, like visually,
Man,
sort
that
of
game
looking
was
around.
good.
It was really good. Like looking around a room and just being like, I don't recognize anything here.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything here architecturally is completely different. But we've spent the last sort of 10 years trying to build stuff that looks more tangible in games, and we've been obsessed with zombies, which is basically just like the
think
opposite
zombies are
of
kind of
robots.
lazy.
Yeah, well, it's like it's sort of the opposite of designing a cyborg or a robot, right?
Yeah.
So we got robot games back when we didn't have good graphics, and now we have amazing graphics, and we're doing games about zombies.
Yeah.
So if these guys, who generally always make really good-looking games, can knock it out the park and just make something that is so like insanely hard sci-fi, I'm totally down with that.
I also
It's-
think that would be the thing that I would play it again.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I would maybe go back to Call of Duty if
And
it was really hard
So
sci-fi.
we've mentioned this briefly before, but maybe the most exciting thing about it is that 2 years ago, 2 Naughty Dog leads joined Infinity Ward, and so this game's directors, Jacob Minkoff, who is a game director at Naughty Dog, and also Taylor Kurosaki, who is a narrative lead at Naughty Dog.
Wow.
And so you have folks who worked on Uncharted and The Last of Us who are now working on this game, like
Wow.
high-level folks who
Yeah.
actually had
It's really
influence on
cool.
those games. Yeah.
So now here's a weird thing. We also heard about rumors that possibly the next Battlefield is going to be World War I, and it's going to be like trench warfare, which is about as far in the opposite direction, sort of like, you know, medieval combat or Civil War stuff that you can get from futuristic technology.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, I've never really cared much about World War I stuff. That sounds way more interesting to me than space stuff at this point.
It's a weird year for first-person games if we get that, the new Call of Duty Future Robot War, and Far Cry Primal.
yeah.
Like, what a strange spectrum.
Well,
like,
and
this is a
Mirror's
kind of
Edge
cool
and
time.
maybe Titanfall 2.
Yeah.
But also,
Yeah.
why?
Yeah.
What happened to cause this? Like they're all still selling very well. They don't need to change.
You're right. Like that's the weird,
Happy about
interesting
it.
thing.
Yeah.
There's no perceived fatigue. I think that I think the last was it the last Call of Duty game that was not. I mean, it's weird because when we see something like this is a financial success, right? It's still sort of underperformed, I believe, in some
Black
ways.
Ops
Compared to the
3
others.
compared to Black Ops 2, and Black
Yeah.
Ops 2 is the highest selling.
It's sort of like when you looked at like the stories about Batman vs Superman over the weekend. It was like, oh, record-breaking sales, and then record-breaking drop-off. Like you look at those numbers, and you're like, oh, well, this still made $600 billion or whatever, but it needed to make 800 because that was just what production costs. Everything ramp up with all that.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it. And I do think there is a sort of perceived fatigue to an extent with this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I know, at least in this room alone. You know?
I mean, I think it's interesting that if this rumor is true, and if the Battlefield rumor is true, and both come out within 3 weeks of each other in October and November, as they generally tend to do, I like the idea that both of them are very different from each other.
Yeah. Seeing stuff that just has a different feel to it is really cool. I'm kind of lukewarm about, like I said, about a futuristic space shooter from Activision. We already have Destiny, and it's like obviously different type of gameplay entirely, but like that itch has been scratched.
I mean,
whereas
Destiny had a single player campaign, I probably would have liked it a whole lot more.
And Destiny's not really. Destiny's sort of about superheroes as opposed to like, what are humans doing right now?
I'm just saying, like, you know, laser
more like
guns
Alien.
and weird armor and stuff. There was a year that I went to an EA preview event, and I think it was 2012 or so, but they had on display, they had like Mass Effect either 3 or DLC. They had Army of Two, Devil's Cartel. They had Need for Speed something or other, and then they had like Battlefield 3 stuff.
And that was around the time as Fuse.
Oh, and Fuse was there too, and everything looked the same. Oh, and Crysis 3.
Yeah.
Everything was carbon fiber to the point where you could say that this is in the same cinematic universe.
I loved Crysis
Like
3.
the idea that EA's games were all in the same world was like kind of a cool idea, and like maybe Mass Effects in the future, but like everything else is kind of like, here's what's happening in in Mexico, here's what's happening in New York, like, and it also sucked because it all was just like all of the weird ragged edges that might have been interesting in some other universe were just been filed down, and you had this incredibly homogenous offering, and it was like they've kind of moved away from that lately. Like the fact that they do have like Battlefront's it looks like Star Wars, and you've got Battlefield is doing World War I, and then you've got Mirror's Edge, and it's Mass Effect is going to a more gritty, space western style. That's cool. Yeah, I'm stoked.
That's why my question is like, it's great, but why? Like they don't need to do it,
But maybe I like that because we were talking about them being safe.
I just want to understand it.
Maybe I mean it's a creative.
Why?
I think creative people want to do something different, and so if a team gets together and is like, "Hey, we're sort of tired of beating the same drum. We haven't told a space opera yet. Let's try to do that."
Like if we're in this room tired of like the last 4 or 5 Call of Duties, imagine working on them.
Yeah.
You got to see that every single day.
Like I think those decisions are like usually up to investors.
Yeah. Well, there's that.
Well, yeah, but I think a big thing here is there's a kind of war of escalation that's been happening with Call of Duty over the last few years, where it's like one team goes, well, we're going to push this a little bit further into the future, and the next team, and all of a sudden it's completely off the rails in terms of like when they first started getting into guns that are a little outside of the realm of reality. A lot of it was based on weaponry that was in development with the military that wasn't actually tangible yet.
R&D,
but they're like looking at it and they're like, well, this is like we're projecting that within 10 years we might have these kind of ghillie suits or whatever the hell it is. Ghillies. And then they started adopting that, and I think little by little it just started being like, well, what about 20 years? Well, we don't know what they're making in 20 years, so let's just guess.
Yeah.
It's all interesting to talk about. One thing I don't ever want to like play apologist to massive corporations, but the reality is it does take a certain amount of time for things to go into effect, and the fact that like EA got voted worst company in America 2 years in a row over ending a Mass Effect or whatever and other stuff, and then we're kind of seeing like a couple years later suddenly they're like,
good guy EA.
Here's Yarny,
yep,
here's like bad, and people still get mad at them. Some people just want to hate them, but I mean
EA make really good games.
Yeah, they do. They sell.
Yeah, but Comcast really sucks.
Yeah.
But the end of Mass Effect 3, though.
Yeah. But I mean, then you look at like Ubisoft, and there was that whole debacle about like, oh, it's too hard to animate a lady character.
Yep.
And then a year later, they're like, here's a lady character you can play as, and it's like they're trying, but these are like 1,000-person projects.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are disconnected and can't coordinate because they're like living in completely different cities.
I mean, to say it's like steering a giant cruise ship is. It's probably easier to steer a giant cruise ship with 1,000 people on it than it is to coordinate when there's 4 different studios working on the same project from
you're right.
a world apart.
So my main question is, how does this fold into the announced Call of Duty cinematic universe? Because they are coming out with movies.
Who cares?
It's like you really care about that? All right.
No, I don't.
They have a cinematic Call of Duty universe, whatever. It's called action movies.
Yep.
And there are a lot of them out there. And they're not based on anything that you can do running and jumping in.
Go watch Hardcore Henry and see if you can stop throwing up on the person.
Go watch Elysium. It's what Advanced Warfare was basically.
Are we talking about this 2 weeks in a row?
What?
I don't want to talk about that man's movies, and I'm not going to talk about Chappie again.
What, Chappie?
We're not talking about
Were we
Chappie
talking
again.
about Chappie?
Yeah, last week we talked about No One Loves Chappie.
Chappie's great.
Chappie's not
I
great.
love
Chappie is a
Chappie.
dumb movie about dirty
it's
men.
me, Chappie. Titular hero Chappie is back. It's me, Chappie. I love Chappie. He's great. He's a robot.
Chappie's
Is that Roman?
Chappie's the
My
robot.
cousin?
Because
You wanna go
I'm
bowling?
Chappie.
Hey!
Chappie.
Okay, so shifting gears from one multi-billion-dollar franchise to another, there are murmurs about the game Grand Theft Auto 6.
I can't believe that you didn't just use the fact that I made a GTA 4 reference as a segue.
No, I don't want to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, this is better. Grand Theft Auto 6. I'm gonna keep saying, hold on, GTA 6. GTA number 6. Okay,
Yep.
there we go. We said it enough. Yeah, people always kind of lose their mind when there's murmurs about a new GTA game. If this is going to be a thing we see anytime in the immediate near future, that would be really cool. But what would that be?
This is a story that got pretty big on IGN, but it's just Tech Radar reporting that sources say that Rockstar is currently in development on GTA 6, which, they are.
Yeah.
Like, yes,
Definitely,
they are.
yes.
They made
Can confirm.
the best-selling game ever.
I can
I'm
confirm
probably
that,
going to follow that up.
A year before GTA 5 came out, Rockstar was in development on GTA
I did
6.
Andrew Goldfarb and I did a studio visit with Rockstar in New York City last fall during Comic-Con, and we were like, "This is gonna be awesome. We're gonna have to get to check out everything." We walked into the lobby and they were just like, "Hey, we can't let you go down any of these hallways. So just go right in here and good to go." And we were sitting there being like, "Huh, well." If they were working on just more multiplayer stuff, like I doubt they'd be like keeping new multiplayer skins from us or anything like that. Like, there's got to be something big going on.
Why do you guys have a live horse that you're mocapping? What are all these revolvers on the ground?
I mean, Rockstar are really secretive about everything.
Yes,
totally,
100%. I will mention 80 men dressed as cowboys walk by.
So
It was-
That's not true.
it was
We don't
just,
know. We don't know.
It was Cowboys Jewel Friday.
wow,
That was really good.
That was incredible, actually.
That was very good.
That's a stupid joke.
The same
I liked
report
it.
also said that back in 2002, so sort of in between GTA 3 and Vice City, that they did a scouting report in Tokyo.
Yep.
I've heard this too.
Yeah, this has been a weird, like, kind of interesting secret we've heard kicked around for a few years now. And I think a lot of us have kind of kept this close to our chest because they're...
We're scared of Rockstar.
I am kind of scared. They make wonderful games. You guys are awesome. I'm a little worried. I don't want to get hurt.
Not scared.
You're not scared? Really?
I don't. What do you do to me?
Well, you don't value your own life.
you could get
That's true.
beat up.
If you did, you wouldn't drink so much.
What do you?
They could put some.
This is an
What do you
intervention.
take from the man who has nothing to lose?
We're not recording. This is an intervention, Marty. You need to
Oh,
stop.
the camera's not even on.
No, so they said that basically the layout of the city is what made it impossible. And I think that's like a very interesting thing. And I think we've talked about it in the show before. But a lot of people are always like, make a video game in my city. And you're like, well, we'd love to, but your city isn't designed to be a good video game. Like,
Most
your
cities
city's
are-
Apparently, LA is.
Most cities are poorly designed.
Yeah.
Like most cities are like. I live in the East Bay, and it's like this is a place that used to be a bunch of warehouses and factories and stuff.
yeah.
And then they're like, let's put a mall here and then some houses. And there's like these nonsense turnaround overpasses that are just incredibly tedious.
Yeah.
And like satellite GPS can't even make sense of them. So like, if you were to drop that into a game and be like, yeah, here's a fun place to drive around, you'd be like, what? Who designed this?
Yeah,
Like, this is
overpasses are not fun in games.
bad level design.
You know,
Yeah.
they're
And
not.
I remember like interviewing people about open world games and being like, "Is this based on anything? Is this like based on a real city?" And they're mostly like, "Nah, man, you're missing the point. Like a functional city and a fun video game are entirely different concepts."
Yeah.
And also like, I mean, I think it's probably kind of boring. Like if driving a real city was enjoyable, then we would have a Google Maps game by now.
Well, they
Like,
made True Crime Streets of New York, which was like the closest we got to like a New York City Google Maps game for a very long time, outside of Destiny, not Destiny, The Division, which is basically just a compartmentalized version of 20
Manhattan.
Didn't
20
Midtown
blocks.
Madness have a New York bit?
Yeah, was it block for block though? Like,
I think it was kind of close.
I know they captured the
Great
Midtown,
game.
but I don't feel like the madness was
The madness wasn't
entirely
quite there.
nailed.
I heard
Madness Square Garden.
Streets of Rage was an
Streets of
accurate-
Rage?
Yeah, it was an accurate New York, but it was just only a few streets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's weird. New York had
picked
a
a-
huge kangaroo problem.
They picked like the 7 angriest streets, and then they kind of like added some
Yep.
roast chickens and garbage cans and stuff.
So I remember playing this game and driving by my old apartment and being like, "Oh, this is cool," but the way the city is gridded out, like it's not fun to drive in because it's just you're driving on a grid. Like that's
Yeah.
not interesting after a while. Same thing in San Francisco. Like San Francisco is a sort of interesting drive because you can't make turns on certain streets and you have to go up hills and other stuff like that. But in a video game, it's just like, well, you're not going to tell me I can't drive here. Like I'm
I'm going to take that corner anyway.
I'm going to take that corner anyway because otherwise you're getting pulled over constantly. Like you can't. Most cars can't drive on Market Street, which is our Broadway in San Francisco. Only like taxis and buses can.
Wait,
Driving-
really?
Yeah.
I would say
Yeah,
that
if you've ever driven on it's a certain stretch of Market Street.
Yeah,
does.
it's something they did in
Yeah.
like the last 6 months or something like that.
driving
Yeah.
in San Francisco, I would say, has more in common with the hacking in BioShock than it does with like Driver San Francisco.
Totally. Yeah. It's like
there's just
connecting
a bunch
snakes.
it's just a
Yeah.
bunch of
Yeah.
weird
Chase the
workaround
snakes.
stuff.
Chase
Yeah.
the
Witness?
Yeah.
Jason Snakes, the Witness game. About turning on TVs is the best spot.
What I heard about this when I heard this rumor a few years ago was that it wasn't so much the physical layout of the geography of Tokyo that was difficult. It was the fact that the Hauser brothers couldn't feel like they really understood Tokyo.
Yeah.
Like it was just, as far as having like kind of a culture to it, it was too alien, and they didn't want to make some kind of like game that was just disingenuous.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
they wanted to really get something that kind of that they understood.
Yeah.
You know,
Which
and,
I
like,
think if you look at the cities that
Back
they've
to
done.
LA.
Yeah. You look at the cities they've done. I mean, they've done New York, they've done LA, they've done like fake Miami, they've done. They did
Done fake
London,
Vegas,
right?
They've done fake Vegas and fake San Francisco
Yeah,
in
yeah.
GTA 3.
Oh, that's
in
right.
San Andreas.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, they did
And
London.
They did
yeah.
London, and it was top down, right?
Yeah,
that was
that was
like
the old
the
one. GTA
second
London.
between
Yeah.
1 and 2 or whatever.
So I feel like doing it in that way, or Chinatown Wars, which is another one, which is just sort of like, well, no one's really checking if this is accurate because it's top down and kind of cartoony. Yeah, I think that's like, it's interesting because Tokyo is so. It's so varied in the way it presents itself. Like there's a shrine in the middle of a major city, and you turn the corner and there's a forest, and then there's just like a weird downtown area packed with people. Like it doesn't really have a beat or a tone or a vibe that's definitive through one area. Like New York definitely does.
I mean, GTA has always been kind of sectioned off.
Yeah.
They've always, like, I mean, the games used to literally section off islands and lock them off from you, but now it's like you'll have a mission that all circle around the same area and then it expands outward. So it's like they really focus on that as well.
Yep,
And getting
yep.
you used to a certain area. So if there's too much variety in one place, like potentially Tokyo has, I can imagine it would be really hard for them to figure out where to start and where to move on.
And there's always that sort of constant struggle between scope and depth. Like, do you want
Yeah.
to make something big or do you want to make something very deep?
Yeah.
And I feel like GTA 5 hit a really good balance with that.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, people are like, I want all of America. And I'm like, that's not going to be very interesting. Like,
Yeah.
the crew did all of America. That wasn't very interesting. It was kind of cool to be like, oh, I could drive all the way across America and hit 30 facsimiles of things.
Yep.
But, like, none of them were as deep as a city in GTA tends to be. So I feel like if they do something like Europe or do something like Southeast Asia, then they would pick a couple small pockets and sort of dig very deep into them and then just make, you know, fake ass paths between them.
You know, this
Yeah,
is
I like that a lot.
kind of a divisive thing. I have no interest in a GTA set in another country. Like, I think that it is a fundamentally American series. I mean, it's made by Brits and Scots, but like it's about cars and crime.
I mean, it's very culturally American.
yeah.
Yeah.
America is a country that was founded on automobiles and handguns, and that's like the fundamental
burgers.
kind of,
I'm President Whitey McCornbread.
and hamburgers. But no, like it's the whole American dream of like, yeah, you're gonna get out there and make something. It's all kind of rooted in like Scarface. It's
Right.
It's that sort of, hey, how do you build up your
And,
empire?
and GTA 5 nailed that with their sort of trio of protagonists sort of attempting that American dream in different ways. And one of them was horrible corrupt, but lapsed and became a family man, and it worked out for him. And one of them was like up and coming, and he meant well, and he was like grinding through a system of basically working bad jobs. And one of them was a chaotic, corrupt, drug-addicted maniac. And I think that totally nails everyone running for president right now, and B, just what it's like to grow up in this country. And like, you know, there's that I was watching Better Call Saul the other night, and they were like, this scumbag comes into the shop that Saul Goodman's working at when he was a little kid, and the guy's like, you either, you know, in America you either become a sheep or you become a wolf. And that's sort of like the way that goes. Like, it's like live or die, right? I don't know if like this sort of like lax European sit down for a coffee, espresso, and people watch in the afternoon, like that Parisian dream of living, that artistry and stuff like that, where it's not like your job isn't who you are, your passion is. Like, I don't know if that really works so much about a game about driving cars and shooting people. So
Yeah, but most, if you take that direction in any culture, you can do that. Like you say that
Sure.
like London, like you can make Notting Hill or you can make a Guy Ritchie movie.
Right.
Like it just depends on how you take it. And the same thing with Rome. Like every city has like a seedy underbelly, and every city has a, you know, banal overtone.
Rome has a lot of cats. That could be interesting.
I mean, what if the next GTA was just animals?
Like Tokyo Jungle.
Don't
Like
even-
Tokyo
I
Jungle.
mean, don't-
That'd be incredible.
don't even
What if-
tease that.
What
I'm
if
so-
you were, I'm going with an H, a horse?
Okay, yeah.
like you're just walking around as a horse. You're
Well,
trying to steal some
It's called
apples.
trotting, not walking.
Trotting. Okay.
No, that's
Or a
like
canter.
jog. Horses still walk.
I mean, I was
they trot.
I was
No,
hoping you could be a different animal, and then the horses would be the cars,
Oh,
and
if you're
hawks
like a
could be
cat.
helicopters.
I mean, they
I
kind
feel
of
like
did
that's
that
just
in
Red Dead
GTA.
Redemption again.
Yeah,
They kind of already did that. It just you had to eat peyote to do it.
that's true.
So
That's true.
Also,
Okay.
like, I love that they added that to that game. I cannot believe they did that. Yeah, I mean, I think we're obviously going to see a GTA 6 at some point, but
I hope we see
5
original
was,
stuff in between that.
5 was 2 years
Yeah.
ago. I'd love to see just some story stuff.
I feel like we'll see 6 at the end of the console life cycle, and it'll
Yeah.
bridge the same way 5 did, and then there'll
Yeah.
be HD remakes on PS5 or PS4.5.
I definitely don't think that I'm definitely not against having a GTA in a different country, but I can't imagine what it would be like or how it would feel like GTA, because I feel like 5 is like a story about American masculinity, basically. And then like changing that, which is what we're used to. Like, I've played them since 3, and it's just, it would feel incredibly different, and it wouldn't feel like GTA. It would start to feel more like a game like Sleeping Dogs.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I love Sleeping Dogs because
In a different way.
Yeah. I mean, but the fact that it doesn't have like guns and helicopters and stuff, like it is intentionally kind of more grounded. Or also, you know, much smaller team working on it, but like
I still think it's interesting they've never truly done a like female protagonist that's actually there the entire game. Like they've had characters in GTA.
Again, I think that's because they are stories about masculinity.
Yeah.
So I don't think they're about.
Yeah, you just saying that actually reminded me of that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I mean, you know, there's a plenty of problematic stuff to pick at in GTA, but it's also I do respect the fact that they're like, let's write what we know.
Yeah.
Like, we don't understand Tokyo. Like, we're like straight white guys. Like, let's talk about that. And I mean, let's interview some Crips if we need insight on what it's like to be a gang member in South Central.
I mean, could you imagine if Trevor was this like Britney Spears after she shaved her head, beating up the car with the umbrella type female character in
That would be
GTA
amazing.
5? That would have been great.
Yeah.
Like a Melissa McCarthy movie or something like that.
And I'd like to see if we do another one that's like set in Los Santos too and has the same 3 characters.
Yeah.
I'd like to see a gay guy, a crooked cop, and like a woman doing something.
Yeah.
Like, I would love it if it was like Lindsay Lohan's character, and it was like, this is her, and she's like kind of like maybe she's lost her mind. And
According
she's
to Lindsay
like,
Lohan, she was already in GTA.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And that lawsuit for drug money.
All right. So, speaking of drama and gossip in the world of entertainment,
That wasn't good.
what is a segue?
Well, speaking
of talking
teen news.
I'm on another show with a lot of bad segues.
I'm a Ryan Seacrest type.
So David Hayter, the voice of Solid Snake and writer of Watchmen, the film, recently opened up about the humiliation of being replaced by Kiefer Sutherland in the latest iterations of Metal Gear Solid. He did an interview with the Game Informer podcast and spoke a bit.
Shout out to
about-
Game Informer. What's up, guys?
Game Informer. Hello.
Hi.
Good day.
Thank you for informing us.
I want to start a magazine called Gum Informer where I just talk about different flavors of gum.
That's
Just
cool.
go down to the store. get
There's a
lots of
blueberry
gum.
magazine at the coffee shop.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
we
all
saw
about
that.
blueberries.
Okay, so anyway,
Blueberry yearly.
he said, I've got no particular love for Hideo Kojima. I don't
Yikes.
feel any need to go back and work with him again. Woof. And he's probably not going to play the game. He says that'll be 60 hours of humiliation that I can't get to.
Yeah, he talked about having lunch with some key members of the team working on the game leading up to it, and being like, "So when are you going to call me in for VO?" And they're like, "Yeah, all right, cool." And then reached out to them again, and they're like, "Yeah, we're not going to do that." And that's like a very I spent an afternoon with David Hayter. He came to IGN. We did an Up at Noon with him, Greg Miller and I. We went to Paragon. We got lunch. We got drunk. We drank a bottle of whiskey together. It was fun. And this was just as the MGS5 stuff started trickling out, and we were trying to figure out if he was being like fake angry or coy. And then the more time I spent with him, the more I realized, like, yeah, he was just straight up cut out of this franchise. There wasn't a romantic way that this happened. It just happened. They just replaced him. And that happens all the time in Hollywood. It happens all the time with movies and TV shows. Your character gets killed off, you get kicked out. But it rarely happens with somebody who was the voice of that franchise for so long.
Yeah,
you
which
know?
is funny because he mentioned in the same podcast, he mentioned having to audition for Snake Eater. So after playing Snake in Metal Gear Solid, Metal Gear Solid 2, he had to audition for Naked Snake and Snake Eater. And then when Guns of the Patriots came around, they literally tried to recast him as Kurt Russell,
Right.
Which was obviously the initial inspiration for
Of course,
for Snake,
yeah, which is pretty funny.
And so that's funny. Then I imagine they called Kurt Russell, and he's like, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
which is weird. You read about stuff like that in Hollywood too. Like you'll read a story about how Brad Pitt auditioned for something, and you're like, why? It's Brad Pitt, and they're like, well, we just wanted to try his version of this character in this scenario. But this is a weird one because it's like he was there for so long, and by all means, it would make sense to keep him there. And I think like I was kind of heartbroken about it. One, for his perspective, but two, from realizing that I think a lot of fans really got it, but the ones that didn't were just like, oh, I don't care. Anything you put in front of me is fine. I didn't even notice. And it's also like the last part of it was that after playing Metal Gear Solid 5, I didn't walk away going like, man, Kiefer Sutherland did an awesome job.
He barely spoke in that game.
90% of his lines were talking to his horse. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah, it wasn't a dramatic change, but I think this line here that says on whether or not he'd play the game, he said that'll be 60 hours of humiliation that I can't get to. I haven't played the latest 2 iterations because it's just too painful. I imagine that was said like somewhat in jest.
Yeah.
Like I read that as him being like, it's just too painful.
Yeah,
like,
I think
not,
so.
Not angry.
I mean, from what I gathered from working with him that one day, like I feel like there was definitely some genuine sort of anguish in that.
Yeah,
like that sucks. It sucks.
That's his big claim to fame. You know?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, it's a lot of people don't know this, but like this. David Hayter's main job is not being a voice actor. That's his side. That's his
he's a screenwriter.
That's his night gig. You know, like he's a screenwriter. He wrote X-Men 2.
Didn't he write a documentary about wolves or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you write documentaries?
I didn't write it. He like went and talked about the wolves.
He fought the wolves.
If you cover yourself in a cardboard box, the baby wolf will pee on the side of it, and you'll become friends.
Yeah, so like he's a movies guy. He's a Hollywood guy. Like he's done screenplays and scripts, and he does cool stuff like that. Like he's responsible for the best X-Men movie.
Yep,
the best one. He worked on Watchmen, which is I don't know where do we put that? The best Zack Snyder comic book movie.
It's the best Watchmen movie.
That's true.
Definitely.
No, The Incredibles is.
Oh yeah,
damn
that's
it.
right.
Yeah, busted.
Well, either way, like this is not his. You know, this is not like a Troy Baker scenario where it's like this is his gig. You know, and he does music on the side. This is like David Hayter does movies, and at night he was Solid Snake and a couple of other roles. It was also like around the same time this was falling apart. He was working with, and that's what he was promoting when he came to do our show, was he was working with Silicon Knights on their new Kickstarter, which never got funded. So he basically shot this video in his house being like, hey, I'm going all in. This is my new voice acting gig in lieu of basically the other stuff not happening.
Yeah.
So his voice acting stuff kind of hit a dead end. The Silicon Knights thing never got funded. That
was
studio
the
is completely
Eternal Darkness thing?
Yeah, it was their
spiritual successor.
Their spiritual successor Kickstarter to Eternal Darkness didn't get nearly enough funding because by then Silicon Knights wasn't a household name. Eternal Darkness was pretty much a off-forgotten GameCube game.
That makes sense, though. He must have worked with them for Twin Snakes.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah, he had the connection to Dennis Dyack and the rest of those guys through that. And now, all of a sudden, like, that hit a dead end. Metal Gear wasn't happening anymore. And it was like, well, David Hayter, the voice actor, basically doesn't exist in games anymore.
Yeah.
And that sucks.
It's where you actually track his resume and his roles that he's had. It's mostly Metal Gear stuff.
Yeah.
Like he was the voice of Captain America in the Spider-Man animated series. He did a handful of things in like the kind of like early 90s before Metal Gear came along, but like you look at someone like Troy Baker or Nolan North, and they're in everything.
Yeah.
They're all over the place. And there are people who are like full-time voice actors who have these massive, massive resumes, but like he doesn't really have that. You know?
Yeah.
All this makes me want is 5-10 years from now, like an oral history of Metal Gear Solid 5.
Oh, that would be fascinating.
Just like sort of a tell-all of just everyone's take on. Like there's that SNL book that's an oral history of 20 years of Saturday Night Live, which is just incredible. It's just first-hand accounts.
Well, I was saying earlier in the show, like I've been watching all these old Star Wars documentaries that basically there's a bunch of people working on those movies who are meeting for the first time. Like this is a prop designer, this is a sound designer. They're talking about their perspective working on that film for the first time. You don't get a lot of that in games because studios dissolve and people scamper in different directions. Like we were talking about before, people from Naughty Dog are working on Call of Duty now.
Yeah.
People from Metroid Prime are working on Halo. Like people just go everywhere. It's not like Max and I have a friend, Mike Morona, who's older Pete from Pete and Pete, and he does lighting for TV shows. And he worked on Boardwalk Empire. And when Boardwalk Empire ended, his entire team got moved to a new show. I think they're working on vinyl now, and it's like he's worked with the same group of people, right? Like there's that sort of like that. I guess this is like a union thing where you just kind of move from thing to thing. Yeah. That doesn't really happen in video games, but so it's hard to like get the gang back together. Like I don't know what the video game version of Jimmy Kimmel or anybody like that being like, we're getting the cast of Saved by the Bell back together.
Ukulele.
Yeah, ukulele, right?
I mean, sort of, honestly.
What's the Netflix Fuller House of video games where some big company goes, let's get everybody back together and we're just going to do an oral history or we're going to do a sequel or something like that. So ukulele is about as close as you can get. That's a really good answer.
I mean, it's weird to think about because like games take so long to make and they take a lot of people, and it's not like the kind of thing where you're necessarily like, I mean, you're working fast. You're working on this project together, but you look at how fast movies are shot, you know, and it's like there's pre-production, production, and post-production, and those are all kind of done by different types of people. But like, a movie shoot will take, like a few months maybe, like depending on what they're up to. But
Force Awakens finished shooting in like May of last year, and they just went into post-production on it and just added all of the space.
And so like people get credit working on like, blowing stuff up and hanging up lights and doing makeup in the moment, aren't necessarily hanging around the editing room when the thing's about to ship. Whereas with games, you get somebody who's there from day one and they're there for years, and then they're there when the game ships, and then they hang around afterwards. But like movies they're like a project. Like when that project ships, when it releases, that's kind of it. They don't stick around for like post production. Like maybe if you're working at ILM full time or Weta or something, but like it's an entirely different model. And I feel like it's easy to forget that. It's also weird because it's less like there are way more names in the credits, and people are, I feel, much less prone to read the credits.
Yeah, in the game.
There's no like IMDb for games. Like there's some game stuff on IMDb, but it's like
they got to start putting Samuel L. Jackson eating a whatever that stupid food.
Shawarmas are delicious. They're
it is delicious.
SEO comes out, has some spaghetti.
Don't have a lot of them here in San Francisco. But no, you're right. Like games are a lot of people kind of working more in synchronicity at the same time, and there's crunch and there's that sort of like teammanship to that. But in movies, it's kind of just like, oh, we shot this. We're passing the torch to this guy who's going to edit it. We're going to pass the torch to this guy who's going to add space doors and sound effects and stuff like that. So I don't know, man. Like it's a weird medium. I feel like we're sort of figuring out how to preserve the history of at least playing the games, but the history behind the creation of them is, I think, disappearing, and that kind of terrifies me.
Yeah.
Like weird tangent on this whole David Hayter thing, but you're right. I would love to see a documentary on Metal Gear.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah.
Here's a nice rumor that I'm excited to hear about. There are murmurs of a Shadow of Mordor 2. Let's see. There was a stunt actress named Lauren Mary Kim, and on her CV, it said that she was working on a sequel to Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor. She's an iStunt profile. Oh my. And she was doing mocap work for Shadow of Mordor, and it was, I guess, in connection with Blur, which are those guys who
do the really rad trailers. And everything. Tim Miller, who directed Deadpool just now, was one of the guys who was
I think one of the founders of Blur.
Oh, that's awesome.
And if you go back and look at, they did like they've done everything. They've done a lot of Arkham games. And
Shadow of Mordor came out in 2014?
Yeah. Yes. So it was revealed in November 2013, and it came out September 2014.
I was just like, I remember being so annoyed that in 2015 we didn't have tons of games with the Nemesis system. I was like, please let this be the year where every game has a Nemesis system.
That's totally right. That's all we said.
And it never happened.
Well, that's because that takes a while.
Yeah.
Like
but
I think
so
that's a
good.
thing. I think that's a thing that this fall and next fall we're going to
really
see. So
do you remember it was like the Arkham Combat thing?
Yeah.
And then every game had the Arkham Combat.
Yeah.
I was right there with you because I remember we were playing Shadow of Mordor in the office and we're like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And this needs to be put into like a Game of Thrones game, like
Game of Thrones,
a political game.
I was hoping that for Mad Max.
Yeah,
like, that's what I was.
I wanted this in a game about a high school, about like
why didn't they put that in
like
Mad
groups
Max?
of like cliques in high schools.
Yeah,
using
like
this.
Bully?
Yeah, like Bully, but with the Nemesis system.
Yeah, this is my bully, Steven Thugdouche. The Unclean or whatever.
Seriously, what reason would they have had to not put that in Mad Max?
I mean, time. Like, I'm sure that system is relatively complicated.
Mad Max is
but
pretty
you can't
much
just
what.
pick it up and
Nope.
No.
Drag and drop the game onto the other game.
Company, like,
I mean,
couldn't have been that hard.
I mean, different studios working on it, but
I think they probably had their own thing down by the time that was happening.
I think the
true.
fact that Shadow of Mordor won like Game of the Year from like the DICE Awards, and like everywhere else was like, there's some other games.
It's because
we played.
technically that game is amazing.
Exactly. And it's one of those things that I don't think we fully understand, but people who make games were just like, how the hell did you do that?
Yeah. That was I guess probably like the sleeper hit of 2014 in terms of like none of us really
had
knew
issues, but
Oh, for sure.
That part of it was just incredible.
And I
was
was definitely fatigued by the end of that game, but
Yeah.
there was 15 hours before that happened.
Yeah,
you
and
know?
it was tough because that was, it had a lot of elements of Assassin's Creed games and
Yeah.
a little bit of Watch Dogs and a little bit of Arkham, a
little bit of Far Cry.
Yeah, a little bit of Far Cry. Whereas, like, if Shadow of Mordor 2 is this year's Fallout 4, which I keep thinking something's going to be Fallout 4, as in it gets revealed at E3 and it's out in November.
Yeah.
And if it's this year's that, this is not going to be a fall with a ton of third-person games with those systems, because we're not going to get an Arkham game this fall, probably, I assume, and we're not getting an Assassin's Creed game for sure.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think
And
Watch
so-
Dogs will be one of those Fallout 4 things
Totally,
this year,
yeah,
by the way.
yeah.
Even though it's all like I always forget when Ubisoft actually announces something because it's basically all but revealed by then.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like they're like, "You're right, everyone. We are taking the year off of Assassin's Creed," and we're like, "Well, we knew that like 4
Kotaku
months
told
ago."
us that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about
was a-
like
was a-
Rockstar making the Fallout 4 of the year?
possibly.
Yeah, I mean, if
Red
Red
Dead.
Dead, is that thing, and Take-Two has said they're going to have a huge presence
Yep.
at E3, so if they're
Rockstar
Yeah,
hasn't
Red
been to an
Dead.
E3
Huge
in ever.
Christmas presents for us to pre-order and get a shirt.
I'm totally
Just a
down for another
collection of
Shadow of
mugs.
Mordor.
Yeah.
If only
Mugs?
for
Mugs.
if only for all those characters in that game, because they're great.
Yeah.
Also, the weird thing that like you mentioned, it's like an Assassin's Creed game, but I was thinking it's just like an Assassin's Creed game, but where you're the only person that knows how to climb walls.
Yeah.
So everybody else would be like,
That is pretty much exactly what they sounded
Yeah.
like.
Also,
Yeah.
it was
and you
weird.
use that cool invisible bow.
But
oh
when-
the
yeah,
cool magic
Also,
bow, and
when
then
that
you
was
like,
so
blah,
cool.
when you ran in that game, you roadie run.
Yeah.
Remember you would like
Like-
bend over and you would like.
That was
a
really funny.
really good
you could
game.
ride on those weird dogs.
And you'd hit over, like jump over logs, and you'd go faster for some reason.
put bees all over my head
Well, and then your like enemy would show up, and he'd be like caw 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 caw, and you're like, oh no, it's Kaka the wrestler. Here he comes. You're like,
Oh, I
and then
love.
you're like, and then you shoot a beehive down. And he's like, oh, and he runs away.
Oh, fight a bees! Well,
He's like, bees make him stronger.
buzzy
He hates the bees.
It's really messed
It was
up
so
how accurate
funny.
this is.
Yeah.
Like, this is just actually what that game
Yeah, like you would be in the. We could do
Every one
it.
of those was so good. I've never
a
played
really
a
good
game that's just had those same entrances 1,000 times every time I was in a game.
Well, it was awesome because like when you were playing an Arkham game, you'd be beating up on 9 thugs and you'd just be hitting them in the head, and it would just sound like cars smashing
What
into
was
walls.
the guy's rat bag?
Yeah,
Rat Bag.
But they
God, that guy.
never like you just fight 9 thugs and it would go away. But this one, you'd be in the middle of a fighting like 15 people, and all of a sudden it'd be like, you put bees all over my dog head. And then
like
you'd throw water, and he's like, oh, I hate water.
And then like a cave troll would just show up and throw a rock at everybody. And you're like, where'd this come from?
Man, how many beehives did you use in that game?
Constantly
I
beehives.
used so many beehives.
Yeah, that was a good thing to do.
That was a good game. Just blowing up stinky gas. They get all upset about it.
You threw a big fart bag in my face again. I'm sorry, blew up the dogs. I'm allergic to me farts.
I think you could poison their grog, and they're like, oh,
sorry, yeah.
poison the water.
Actually, like,
And then they start looking for you. It's
I
good.
really
It's
love
good.
the stealth element of that too.
Stealth was
Like,
great.
they'd be like hanging all like 15 dirty boys hanging out in this like big messed up abandoned church cavern with no roof and just bats and crap everywhere and just going.
With the stealth missions, if you screwed it up, you could just run.
Yeah, you
like,
just
you'd
run
be like,
away.
well, I'll be back later. Like, you could just, like,
What I love is it like you'd screw up on that.
All right, I'm done.
And like you're
So loud.
like you could accidentally like make someone stronger by getting away.
yeah,
Yep.
which was the worst because they'd be like, see, he got scared away. See how tough I am? And then everyone else would like him, and he would like be like he'd level up and you'd see him
Yeah,
again.
he
and he'd have
became
this
their new king.
Sweet armor, and you'd be like, damn it.
Dogs.
It looks like it's got that boy over there. Well, make you a new president.
All right.
That's actually how America votes on its president, is who can scare the most boys away.
That makes sense. Yeah.
If you'd like to let us know how much it annoys you when Brian and I do that voice, you can shoot your emails to beyond@ign.com.
That's
and
right.
We sometimes read them and get sad. On that note, fun thing that is possibly happening. I've been talking about this for a minute now. PlayStation VR, is it going to come to PC? Because if it does, that could be real smart.
Yeah, it might work on PC. That might be the cheapest way to use VR on PC. Aside from, are you okay?
All right.
She's really.
I think I'm getting pneumonia again,
Oh, great.
so that's fun.
Why did you put an R at the end of that word? Pneumonia.
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 It's my accent.
I'm sorry. Why did it feel
Oh, I have a
horrible?
disease that kills people, and you're like, you said that.
Also,
funny.
you just made fun of accents for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
also true.
So this is running with that
Keep
theme.
going.
Okay, so stop it.
She's laughing. I'm sorry. I'm not making. If she's laughing, it's okay. Anyway,
So,
PSVR
It's
on
not
PSVR.
admissible in court.
if it's a thing that you can get and you plug it into your PC and it works with the stuff that already runs VR, like
Yes.
Oculus and Vive, that's cool because it'll be the cheapest one, and maybe you use it on your PS4 and your PC. Who knows?
I feel
But yeah.
like this isn't going to happen.
Really? Because the head of vice president of Sony Computer Entertainment said that because the PS4 basically has the guts of a PC, that it's not out of the question, which is kind of a rare thing for a exec, VP, or whatever to say. Usually,
I
they're
mean,
kind
I
of.
know we've discussed it before how it would be the smartest thing that they could possibly do. It would be very smart for them to make that work.
Look at
Right.
look
I
at
just feel like it
the
won't happen on launch.
look at how they did with. Probably not at launch, but I think eventually, especially after maybe
Yeah.
stuff starts to sell. But like, look at how the DualShock 4 controller became like they jumped on that.
Yeah.
Like they were like the 360 controller was kind of the standard for PC controller use,
Yep.
and Microsoft dropped the ball hard when they were like, we're working on drivers. It's like, how? Like, why didn't you just? Why wasn't that a thing? It did out of the box, and now like,
Yeah, but still, I mean, the Oculus comes with the Xbox One controller.
Sure. So
Like,
maybe
I think that's
I mean-
still. I think people are still leaning more towards the Xbox controller for PC support, like as a standard thing. I know a lot of people started using PlayStation controllers because it became just as easy. But I think by then people were sort of ingrained with their routines.
You're totally
But-
right. It's people who wouldn't know would just automatically get the Xbox without trying because that's what they're used to at this
Yeah,
point.
yeah,
Yeah.
But yeah, this is cool. I've almost no interest in this. I
Yeah.
mean, it's
The thing that the way it makes sense to me is it's less like I'm going to play the Oculus games using my PSVR and more of I'm going to be able to utilize the fact that a PC has 1,000 times more apps than a
Yes.
PS4 can.
Yes.
And so I'm going to use my cool space mask in order to go to Google and try out their new VR stuff in
Yep.
order to probably have better Facebook integration with this. And so
It's
I
your-
feel like it's more for the non-gaming sort of lifestyle.
It's your
things
ticket
that are-
to a way more like open source
Yes.
world than a console will ever provide.
Totally,
you,
yeah.
you know?
porno.
And porno.
And porno.
It's called. That's short for pornography.
It's long for porn.
I'm thrilled to.
Long for porn, short for pornography.
I will be examining somnography through my space mask very soon. Okay, so did you guys order a PSVR?
Yeah,
it went up for pre-order
today.
Yeah,
So PSVR, there's the core and the
there's the Snugglers bundle.
Snugglers bundle.
Yes,
And the
It
Grundle
comes
box.
with a blanket
Grundle
and
box?
some
Yeah.
ointments.
So when was the so there was a lot of talk when the PSVR got announced at $399. People were like, "This is great. It's cheaper than all the other ones. This is awesome." And I was kind of sitting there being like, "It is, but why?" And then when you dug into it a little bit, it was like, oh, so the $399 version doesn't come with Move controllers, doesn't come with a camera. But if you have those things already, cool. I don't know a lot of people that actually owned or kept Move controllers, but a lot of a decent amount of people, or at least 15% of
don't
PlayStation
need
owners,
them.
you don't need them. You can. It's good to have them because I think a lot of things are going to work better
Is that
with them.
IGN box
No,
quote
they
there.
don't
It's
work
good to
that
have them.
Good, though.
Really?
So we talked
I've
about
had
this.
a bunch of issues with them.
Yeah.
You went in the Beyond Facebook group and
Yeah.
you asked everybody like specifically.
Yeah. So
What's
let me,
your weight? So
let me
wait,
ask
wait.
you guys first.
Yeah, so I
mean,
didn't.
I didn't either.
I didn't either.
I'm not going to buy a VR thing this year.
Okay.
No single game has been like.
So I
that's the
actually
thing
did
for me.
I did twice. I pre-ordered the $4.99 version from Best Buy.
Yeah.
Which had, even though I had a camera already, I saw it, the door open, and I jumped on it, and it was weird. I mean, you guys talked about this on the show last week, I think. Thank you for bringing this up, by the way. But I got some sad news recently about my mom getting cancer, and I rolled over in bed one morning, like having barely slept, depressed, miserable, grabbed my phone, and somebody was like, "Hey, the helmets that lead you to a happy world are available right now." And with one eye opened and my thumb, I pretty much auto-clicked and bought a PSVR from Best Buy.
Dude, I buy a lot of stuff when I'm sad.
Isn't that weird?
I just spend so much money when
Yeah,
I'm sad.
it's like a weird.
Did you
I
say
was
you just buy
actually
statues when you're sad?
Well, I actually do. Yeah, I will just buy like a Deadpool statue and a Cable statue and a Wolverine statue, and it'll be like $2,000 worth of stuff, and I'm like, this is
it's
not really helped.
You get yourself a treat sometimes. It's escapism in another way. I mean, VR absolutely is escapism. So I don't know if that played into it. I was thinking about that because I'm like, I'm a little worried if that's the reason I bought one. Like if I bought,
It's kinda scary.
If I bought this out of depression, which is something that I only sort of tangentially suffer from here and there, that is not. I mean, there are people listening to the show that suffer from it constantly, that are probably excited for VR because it's just a thing that's different than the real world they're in right now. But for me, it just caught me at a time where I was like, Yeah, I'll go in there.
I think there's also that sort of it's not real yet, you know.
Yeah.
As a pre-order, it's like there's a transaction going on there, sort of, but like
there's a hold on your card, basically,
exactly.
and that's
like
it,
it's not,
you know.
Yeah. Like
And then I
not
saw
really buying it just yet.
So it was smart how they did this because they know that the people that wanted this, and again they never announced on day one during GDC the $499 bundle version, right? But that's the first version they put on sale for pre-order. So if you were desperate for VR, you jumped on that one. Today, PSVR went up the core versions, which is the $399 version they actually announced. That's the one I ended up ordering and canceled my other one because I figured I have the camera and I'll buy the Move controllers for cheaper, and ultimately I'll save a couple bucks.
Yeah, to actually answer that question, like Marty and I are going to be heading a lot of VR content, so I'm just planning to use a review unit. But I think if I didn't work in the industry, I would have bought PSVR.
Right.
If I wouldn't
Right.
have access to it, otherwise I would have bought it because I want it.
Yeah.
We got a lot of interesting feedback from the Beyond group. Stephen Pettigrew said, I didn't order it because I'm afraid of it not getting supported like Move and PS Camera and such. For the price of entry, it's too much of a risk.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
I think that's totally fair.
Somebody went through the sort of history of, well, first of all, the history of peripherals that come out sort of midstream in a console launch is historically not great. You look at stuff like the Kinect, you look at Wii Motion Plus, you look at PlayStation Move, a lot of things like PSP Go, which is an iteration of something that was...
that's why they tried to make Kinect 2.0 come with every single console,
Yeah.
but obviously that didn't go very well.
Yeah,
But
they
the
wanted
idea
to be there
behind
on
that was
day
like we
one.
want everyone to have to support it, basically.
And do you remember you were working in the industry during this time? They treated Kinect, the original Kinect, like a console launch. That was their quote. Microsoft was like, we are treating this like a console launch. But historically, Sony's stuff, like outside of their PlayStations, hasn't really knocked it out of the park. You look at View, you look at PlayStation TV, you look at the Move controllers, you look at just the weird pickle that came with the Move controller. A lot of stuff like that. Like it's kind of too little, too late. And this is coming out what I presume is to be halfway through the life cycle.
iToy did okay,
iToy did okay,
but it only had
yeah.
a very small handful of games.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, again...
With those weird monkey rats.
This is a different,
Really fun.
different animal here. Like, this is a very strange
Yep.
new device, and it's kind of hard to fully grasp like what
I think it's a revolution.
what it's going to be played like.
So Adrian Jimenez says, I ordered it. I play lots of Smash Brothers, but outside of that, I feel like I'm just bored with games. The idea of VR intrigues me. It seems like finally a new way to play games. And I was thinking about that. Like, what does this mean for sort of lapsed gamers? We've talked about what it means for casual gamers, but in terms of what it means for people who they're kind of bored, they're kind of fatigued with just sitting with a controller in their hand staring at their TV like they've been probably doing for 20 years.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there's this new thing. Maybe this will bring some people back into the fold,
Yeah, that's a good point. Cameron Matthew Ford said, I didn't pre-order because I want to see what the Nintendo NX is first. That is a really, really good point.
Sure.
Yeah.
If I'm going to spend a couple $100 on a new thing this fall, which
You want to see all the things.
Yeah, we assume NX, whatever NX is, or half of whatever NX is, will probably be this fall, considering Nintendo has nothing else.
We got
And
rumors
Zelda
the
will
other day
probably-
that they're ceasing production on the Wii U, which they
so yeah.
refuted. It's clearly looking at Nintendo's release roster. There's just not much left in the tank on that one. And I don't think that's an interesting perspective because gamers have a finite, humans have a finite amount of money to spend a year. And if you say, I have $500 to spend on something new for games this year, is it going to PSVR, which is maybe going to get a handful of games, or the NX, which is maybe going to get a handful of games?
Yeah. I mean,
You go either way on
there
that
was
one.
a point in time where I'd say, yeah, the Nintendo thing will definitely have more consistent support. But I mean, I don't know.
I don't know anymore.
I mean, I
Like,
feel
really
like
don't.
NX is going to have Zelda. Whatever it is, it's going to have the Zelda
I mean, that's the thing, is
preview
if-
that we wanted.
If this fall a Nintendo thing comes out with a Zelda thing and a Mario thing, I don't think PSVR is going to have a thing that's as good as a Zelda thing or a Mario thing.
That is true.
I think
the
it's
first
interesting
year,
because
whatever.
I mean I don't pretend to work at Nintendo, but I think when they probably
your
pick,
uncle work at Nintendo?
My uncle worked at Nintendo
Yeah.
in the 80s. Yeah, that's every kid at school.
Who's the inspiration for Wario?
That's right. But they, I feel like Nintendo looked at 2016 and they're like, this is gonna be wide open. Nobody's buying anything, and we got plenty of people we can convince to. And then all of a sudden it's like, no, there's like 6 different $600 VR kits on the market, and they're all eating into your reserves.
Yeah.
And you guys don't have an answer to that. This is like when I believe it was Iwata. He said like 10 years ago, he's like, gamers don't want to go online.
Yeah.
And gamers were like, yeah, we do. And they missed that boat by like 5 whole years. And by the time they caught up, it was too late and they didn't know what they were doing with it. I feel like VR, if it takes off, they're going to completely miss that conversation by a few years because it's
Unless
antithetical
NX
to their
is VR.
philosophy. unless NX is VR, which I totally doubt.
I thought
Same.
NX is a cool pickle controller.
It might be.
That's just a full screen with no buttons.
That was a 3D render somebody made.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Never mind.
Yep. Joshua M. Holt says, I played it at PSX. To me, it's akin to the shift from 2D to 3D gaming, an entirely new way to play.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
Yep.
I think that's one of the things that was sort of lacking at the launch of the PS3 and the PS4 was that feeling of like, I remember the
Something
first
being
time.
new.
Yeah. Do you remember like the first time you played like a 16-bit game, or the first time you played
Yeah.
Mario 64 or anything else where you could move the camera around?
I mean, that's my problem is I could see it being as big of a shift as 2D to 3D, but I have not seen it's Mario 64 yet.
Right.
Which literally we probably haven't seen a game like Mario 64 since that.
No.
GTA 3 arguably, but
That's really interesting to think about. Like I remember the first time I went to a cyber cafe in like Cambridge, and I was like in 4th or 5th grade, and the N64 was about to come out stateside, and I think the PlayStation was already out, but nobody had it. It was like right before that Christmas when everyone got these things for the first time, or whatever it was, and like I remember I just waited in line to play Mario 64 and Pilot Wings, and I was like, that's pretty cool, that's pretty fun, and then I was like, hey, I got Battle Arena Toshinden over here, I could play that too, and I was like, there was this weird like, oh, this is something that already...
Did you say ballerina?
Ballerina Toshinden. It's a dance game, and it's very good. You knock people out of the ring, get them disqualified. But no, like, it was just like... At the time, I was like, N64 had more of like this magic factor to it because it was Nintendo, and like PlayStation was this thing that, like, I was like, Sony, that's like what my mom's boombox is. You know, like, I don't... Why does my mom have a boombox? I don't know.
I think
your
you guys...
mom is Radio Raheem.
Does she like cool ballerinas also?
I think you guys are right in that VR right now feels like if Mario 64 was only the castle courtyard.
Yeah.
You know? It's
You're
like
totally right.
Yeah.
It's like, wow,
I like
I
that
can
place.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's
can do
kinda
this.
fun.
This is great. Can I go in the castle? Well, no, not yet.
Yeah.
Can I jump in the paintings and go play a 15-hour robust action platforming game? No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you can check out the courtyard.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what it's
Yeah.
like, and I wonder how long we'll have to wait until we have our.
Yep.
Castle.
Max, you want to grab this next one?
Chris Koshon said, I pre-ordered PSVR because I feel like it's going to be the type of thing I can introduce to anyone who comes to my house, whether it be my nephew or my grandma. It's the type of technology that will impress people and add a sense of wonder to their lives they didn't know existed. Plus, Star Wars. Me plus VR X-Wing equals happy.
Yeah.
I really agree with this, too. Like, periodically
I
there...
want my grandma to play VR
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
bad.
Like, I think the fact that I think there's that theme park appeal where it's like it is sort of a scary, unfamiliar thing to put something on your face, but at the same time, it is like it is so recognizably science fiction-y.
Yeah.
And the fact that the controls are going to be they have to be dumbed down because you can't see your hands. You know, if they're going to like press square, you're like, which one? Like if you're not familiar with a controller, that's going to be like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to be like, here's your button to jump. That's it.
I also feel like PSVR or VR in general is going to be more than just things you control with your hands. Like I think the grandma demo is basically like, hey, here's a tour of like if you look at
What's
like
it, the Deep?
Yeah.
That is the one that I.
where you're just looking around,
Yeah.
right? And it's just like you're sitting there, you're looking forward, and you're like, this is great. And you're like, well, look left. And your grandmother looks left, and she's like, oh my God, I'm in a Shark Tank or whatever, or I'm in.
Show your grandma
Yeah,
the
that
thing with a
sounds
shark
mean.
attack.
My grandma
was
is a
gonna say-
91-year-old Italian woman. I'm terrified of putting a VR helmet on her head. That might be one of the last things she ever sees.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just it's weird to think about that. There's always like the select things that I want to show my mom, and it's like a sunset in The Witcher.
Yeah.
Or like, hey, check out what they made an AT-AT in Battlefront.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like the stuff that doesn't immediately like be like video games. I'm like stuff that's more like this is some other new medium. Like this is something that transcends the idea of pushing buttons and making the guy run and jump.
I remember showing my mom Assassin's Creed 2 in Italy, and I'm like,
mom
you're
loved
from
that
Italy.
game.
Speaking of Italy, and I was like, look at this, like this is the Colosseum, like this is Italy, like this is Florence. Look what they did, and she's like, this is gorgeous. And then I bumped into somebody on the street, and 5 people started stabbing me, and she was like, why is there blood everywhere? And I'm like, oh, because the point of this game is to murder people. And she was like, oh, this sucks, and walked away. Or whatever her version of this
I
sucks
don't like
was.
that.
Yeah.
And my
She's
mom
like, "Oh,
really
it's
likes
nasty."
Assassin's Creed too, like
Yeah.
because she'd been there, so walking around all of the Italian places, she was like, "Whoa, I went there once."
Yep.
And
Yep.
both my mom and my stepdad were like that when I was playing Unity. They were like, "Oh,
Right.
right."
I've seen
and
that
they were
building.
like
I've seen
talking
Notre
to each other,
Dame.
trying
Yeah.
to figure out what year the game was set in based
Yep.
on the landmarks that were still
Yeah.
there and what
That's
they looked
really
like
cool.
and stuff.
Aw.
My mom really liked Fable.
Yeah. Had she been to Albion?
Until Dawn. Yeah, she's been to Albion as well.
And she's been chased by scary men with masks.
Yes.
and
One last
flamethrowers.
thing I want to add is he says he wants to try it with his nephew. If your nephew is younger than 12, he shouldn't.
He's not allowed.
Not
It
allowed.
doesn't matter.
That's the rules.
You can give your 12-year-old nephew a cigarette.
Oh yeah, says the guy with enamel carved out of his glasses who can't see anything.
I could
Your
see-
eyes are shot. You don't care about the children.
Go
of
farm. I
tomorrow.
can see just fine.
Who said that? Okay, so Christopher Robert Freeman says, I did not get one because here in Canada it's close to $800 with tax.
Suck
That's
it, Mitch.
a lot of money.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. I
That
was looking at
sucks.
Australia numbers. It's the same. It's the same deal.
Yeah.
I don't, how does that work? Is it just expensive to send stuff there? Is everything more expensive there? Is pizza $30 a slice in Australia?
Yeah.
It is.
No.
Oh, I don't know.
we actually had we needed,
Vodka's like $100 though.
what?
Yeah.
Well, video games are 110.
Never go
$100.
there.
I'd rather have a
$110.
vodka then.
Yeah.
I think it's getting a little bit cheaper.
But do you like? Is minimum wage $100 an hour?
Minimum wage is like $17 an hour.
Okay, so it scales.
Yes, people earn more money.
Yeah.
Okay. Danny Shaw says, I did pre-order PSVR because I craved the experience I had when I was a kid. I used to make a blanket fort that covered the family TV and have this capsule
I
of
love this
solitude,
story.
just me and my game system. As a grown-ass man, I can't recreate that feeling.
Yes,
my
you can.
imagination can't seem to break me free of the reality around me when I was a kid.
pillow fort.
I get this excitement inside my chest when I think that I'll be immersed into a digital playground that VR has to offer. It's like 1995 meets 2016 for me.
It's really cool.
Yeah, I really love that story.
get
You can totally put a TV blanket over your TV right now.
Actually, it's really bad. It's really bad because it'll overheat your consoles. Is
that true?
It's unsafe.
No, you could just do. Max and I talked about how we play Vita in bed, and
Yeah,
we'll
get a
just put
Vita
the
and get big
blankets under
big old
it.
headphones and get under the covers, or you just build a fort in your
do a
living
cool
room.
toot.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't do a toot. Don't hotbox your
Do a
Vita.
hot
Don't-
dunk.
No, don't do a hot dunk in your bed.
Don't hotbox your Vita.
Don't hotbox your Vita. Podcast Beyond 2016. Carter McDaniel says, I didn't pre-order one because this time next year there's going to be a PSVR 2 announced. How do we feel about that?
I don't think so.
I think
Is
it's
this the new-
fine
is
to
this like
wait
an
for
iPhone thing?
wireless. I don't
Really?
think it'll be next year, but I think wireless is going
wireless
to get
one?
announced.
Did any of us think a PS4K is going to be this
Nope.
year?
I had no
a year
idea.
ago.
A year ago.
I don't know. Sony's doing
I
weird
was-
things.
True.
There's that shot of everything that comes in the box for PSVR, and I think a lot of people think VR is basically you sitting on the couch with this wireless headset and it's minimalistic future. It's really not. Like there's wires running everywhere. There's a wire running from the VR headset into this giant box that's basically powering it, and those are wiring into your console, which I think will use both USB plugs in the front of your system. It's gonna get snaky in your apartment.
Yeah. You have to put a wire in your pee hole for haptic feedback.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I've
right.
heard that.
You
Yeah.
don't have to.
Oh,
but
I
if you
did.
do- but if
it
you
helps
do,
with the immersion.
Oh, it's still there.
again, you really need new glasses.
Evangeline Gale says, I've got kids, and short of someone else watching them, I just can't block them out. Not to mention, there really isn't a game yet that makes me feel like I need one. That's
Yeah.
Really good point.
Yeah.
No killer app, and you've got a family to take care of,
Yeah.
or a dog, or a friend, or a wife,
actual
whatever.
human people.
Yeah, or you married your dog.
Yeah, which is
People
illegal.
call your
Who's
wife
also
a
your best
dog,
friend?
which is mean.
Yeah, that's not very nice.
Yeah, so
Don't
that's
do
what
that.
everybody's thoughts on VR. You know, we got hundreds more. Head on over to the Podcast Beyond Facebook group. You can find that just by going to Facebook and typing in Podcast Beyond. I hope I should know the URL. I have it bookmarked. So yeah, that's pretty much it. We actually got one question to our email that I wanted to throw at you, Alana. This is from Alex Irish. He says, I was just curious if she's present this week. She is.
Hi.
What did Alana Pierce do before she got to IGN? Would love to find out, as making it from Australia to San Fran to be a toys editor always interests me.
Every time it
Alex.
happens.
Yeah.
That one time.
That might be the first time that's ever happened.
I think it's literally
Yes.
the first time, which is pretty cool because that's the you and I are both people that came from very far to do something at this job that wasn't already being done at the same time.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah.
I have written about games for 4 years. I worked on radio for 4 years, and I worked on TV for, I think, 2.5. So.
You're selling yourself really short. You hustled and freelanced.
Yes, I did.
Extensively.
It worked very hard. It was very, very difficult. I worked for free for a really long time, and then
Yep.
as a volunteer for the same thing. And I was a freelancer for a long time, and then it took about 2.5 years before I started getting paid significantly, and then I got a full-time job. I was doing that for 1.5 years before I got here, so it was
Yeah.
a lot of work.
I think a big part of it is that on the internet, your location is almost secondary. It's sort of like finding out your degree. Like it's like I have an art school degree, but you wouldn't know that when listening to me podcast.
Yeah, I should mention I also
Yeah.
studied journalism
Yeah.
for 3
Mhm.
years.
Yeah.
But like when I found out about your work, I think one of the last things I found out was that you were living in Australia. I just assumed you were here or in the UK or some. 'Cause I don't know a lot bad Australia, as evidenced by every time I've talked about it in the show.
Really, every time you just open your mouth in general.
About
It's just-
anything,
yeah.
history, people, names,
Yeah.
any
How it works.
dieting.
I don't know anything.
I don't know anything. So yeah, I think it's really cool that the Australia part was actually the hardest part about you getting here, right? Because you had to go through.
The visa process was super difficult. It took
Yeah.
like 7 months or something.
Visa's
It
second most
took a really
popular
long time.
handheld. It's a
PlayStation Visa. Don't hotbox your Visa.
Don't hotbox your visa.
Yeah, it was,
Don't toot on it.
It was tough, but I would say just for anyone in Australia, it's not limiting because I didn't live in the city where the games industry was. So basically, what I was doing was I worked retail to afford to go to events, and then when I started going to events in Sydney, was how I started networking with people who would I would then write for their magazine or write for their website, and it just kept going like that. I was very poor for a very long time to be
Yeah.
able to afford to do that. But
That's a big part of it. No one
Yeah.
really tells you that part.
Yeah.
It's not glamorous.
a lot of
but
flights. To
Also,
Sydney.
like moving from some place to another place to work on the internet is very much missing the point. Do as much as you can while staying someplace cheaper than San Francisco, which is literally anywhere else in America.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, it's people always do that thing where they're like, "How do I become a writer?" It's like just start doing it. you
Start
know?
writing, yeah.
Start writing.
Yeah,
Reach
the
out to
dirty
Yeah.
secret about the games industry is that it doesn't pay a ton at the start.
Or ever.
Or ever really for some, and it's like it's mostly takes place in some of the most expensive places in the country or in the world, really. So
Yeah,
you're gonna get
sometimes when,
roommates. You're gonna commute for an hour or whatever it is. You know, like you're gonna do whatever you can to make it work because you love what you do, and the doors will keep opening as long as you keep doing awesome stuff.
Yeah, when people ask the question of like how do I write about video games, my answer is always like, I don't think anyone who's written about video games has ever asked that question because they're just writing about video games.
Just start.
Like
yeah.
I was telling Marty the other day that I started writing about games when I was about 14 on a crappy Tumblr that I had, and that's where I started reviewing games. And they're all terrible, but I like kind of built an audience on there magically just by
Yeah.
constantly writing all the time, even when I was still in school. So it's just like kept doing it. So just stop asking people.
Well,
just write all the time.
I commented on a comment the other day because somebody was like, "This article sucks," and I was like, "Write a different one."
Yeah.
Like, write the one you like. Like, this is an opinion piece. It's an op-ed. If you don't like this op-ed, write yours because you have one in you. Maybe you can't write it. But I said to him, like, write it and send it to me, and I will read it. And I'm not going to do that with everybody. Please. Not all of you. Not all of you at once.
If you want to get Brian's attention, all you have to do is tell
it's too
him
much.
he
It's too
sucks.
much.
You just
but I
nag
think
him.
it's just like I do that a couple times a week where I'll see something like that and I'm like, I will open my door for this for you, and I will give you time in the morning. I'll sit there with my coffee and I'll read what you wrote, and I will not shit on it. I will give you notes, hopefully, and like you'll get better. Was that the first curse
That
of
was
the
the
episode?
first curse.
Damn it.
On that note, though, I've had people like send me their reviews for me to read over.
Yeah.
And they will copy paste things from my exact same review of that same game.
What?
They will copy paste parts of my review and put it into their own review. And I'm like, so what we did here is plagiarism. Maybe don't do that.
Don't do that.
I remember what I wrote.
Kanye West kind of did that with Daft Punk. He's like, "Hey, I rapped over your song," and they're like, oh, "All right, well, we're all getting money today."
Okay, so on that note, thank you all for tuning in. If you would like new, exciting ways to tune in, obviously for audio listeners, we're on iTunes, we're on Libsyn, we're on all these various feeds and stuff. There is a video version of this every week. Sometimes it's later than the audio. I'm sorry. You can find it on iOS, on PS4, on Xbox, but you know it's there's a bunch of IGN apps. So if you would like a new and exciting way to check that out, check it out. It's all free.
The PS4 app actually works super duper well.
Yeah,
And that's
I'm-
like that's always the way I recommend to like my buddies back home who want to watch like E3 conferences and stuff
Yep.
like that, and like our live streams, and be like, just watch them on there.
Yeah, you
It
watch
just
Up at Noon on
works.
there, which Brian and I do every Thursday.
That was a
right.
very good plug.
At noon?
At noon?
yes, on
At noon, it's
Thursdays.
live on noon Pacific
What's your
time, and then
code?
the episode gets archived the next day at noon Pacific time on Friday.
Wow, that's
then we write-
like several noons.
We write
Yes.
scandalous
That's a series
headlines
of
that
nudes.
make people outraged before they even watch the video.
Dogs.
Y'all talking about Ghostbusters?
What are they? We don't know.
Ghostbusters is a
Yeah.
stupid
I would
ghost
pick
star.
Marty, what kind of dog is Peppers?
Peppers is small fluffy black.
Yeah, he's right.
yeah.
Small fluffy.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
a baby house wolf.
I call him a little cinnamon bun baby boy. Is what I call him.
Ooh, I've never had a black cinnamon bun.
I want to do one of those like if he ever runs away, I don't want him to do that. But if he ever does, I'm going to be like he answers to the following, and
He's
it's just
run
going to be
away
like
on
a.
me like twice. And you
Oh, yeah,
just
there was
have
that
to
one time he had to
chase
run
him
down the
down the
block.
Yeah,
street
it's
and he
because
just
you're-
doesn't come back.
You're young and irresponsible, and you have to carry around a small satchel of bacon grease with you at all times in case the dog escapes.
Oh.
Yes, and you must make a trail of it so he'll sniff along the sidewalk and lick it up.
Dogs react to Australia.
Yes. On that note, thank you all for listening. I love you. Beyond.
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 I'm not gonna look at the camera.
Okay, me neither.
Yeah.
Let's not even pretend it's there.
Don't